Fellow Nigerians, a political crisis in Rivers State. President Tinubu's announced suspension of an elected governor and the State House of Assembly. And then the National Assembly's voice assent to that unconstitutional declaration is yet another reminder that Nigeria is not and has never been a democracy. Nigeria has been poorly attempting to imitate democracy, but since 1960, it has never been democracy for even a single day. And the events of the last few days is another stark reminder. We are told that democracy is the ability to choose. The question I ask you today, between 1960 and now, who have you chosen? Because what we have is a poor copy of democracy where the totems are periodic elections and the power to choose. But do you really have the power to choose? Now, let me tell you the constraints of the imitation, because Africa must own its own assumptions if we are to make a credible attempt at self-governance, if we are going to leapfrog from where we are to the next place we are going to. I want you to ask yourself, what country do you know in the past 50 years that has leapfrogged from a third world country or from a developing nation to a developed one in the past 50 years using this American version of democracy? None. Look at the Middle East. And look at the results of Asia. Those are not as a result of democratic. And then even in Europe, where you can now see that democracy has indeed flourished, of course, it's now regressing. You ask yourself, did they start off being democratic? If you read Wars, Guns and Votes, the seminal work by Paul Collier, he profiled a number of research cases where they have determined that for democracy to work for any country, that those countries must meet basic thresholds. Two out of those thresholds, number one is education, that your population must be educated to a certain degree. So you're talking about literacy rates. We don't have it here in many African states. And if you don't have those literacy rates, your democracy will begin to work against you, because you tell people that they have powers to choose, but people who are not mentally emancipated yet cannot choose properly. The second is the buying power of the citizens. If people don't have their economic liberation, political liberation is not going to mean so much. So look at the development model of Europe, for instance. They used monarchical system to build a society. And as they were doing those monarchies, the society got to a place where the people were both literate and they have resources, and they revolted and pulled down those monarchies. And that's what you're beginning to see in Southeast Asia and Middle East today. The Middle East is developing at an unprecedented rate. Qatar, Oman, Saudi Arabia, UAE, that these were once desert nations. And you saw, because what we have is democracy, and democracy does not allow you, in our own case, to build consensus on major national or developmental issues. Yes, between 1960 and now, no democratically elected National Assembly has been able to make a fundamental alteration to Nigeria's constitution. No democratically elected administration has changed even one bit of structure of the nation. All the structural changes in Nigeria, both the creation of 19 states, creation of 30 states, creation of 36 states, even the 1999 constitution, all of those are products of military dictatorship. Why is that? Because in dictatorships, it's easier to form consensus. And that's the consensus you see that helps to move Asia forward. That's the consensus you see that helps to move Middle East forward. We don't have that consensus in our own system. So we are unable to, in 60 years, mobilize consensus on key developmental trajectories of the nation. Yet, power is centered around one man. The fundamental promise of democracy is that power is distributed. But you and I know that anytime you have a president in Nigeria, that the constitution begins to smell like a president. So if you have a Tinubu in office, although the arrangement is supposed to be distributed powers, that those different nodes of power distributions still submit that power to the president. And that's why you see a National Assembly that is functioning an operational extension of the presidency. So, if you have that, what you call democracy does not allow you to mobilize consensus on key national issues, yet they submit political power in the case of one person that they are able to act unconstitutionally, that we waste money every 4 years conducting what we are told are periodic elections, in which the citizens are told that they are allowed to choose, yet they are not allowed to make any choice. Why then are we deceiving ourselves running this unworkable system? We don't have the promise of democracy. We don't have educated population to make it work. We don't have the literacy rates to make it work. We don't have the buying power of the citizens to make it work. And the only thing that can help us leapfrog is when we unduly take away this chariot to design our own unique systems. Our culture is centered around one strong man. But then we have a strong man who is at liberty to spend our money the way he wants, who is at liberty to steal the way he wants, but he is not at liberty to make structural changes. So he can suspend the governor, of course unconstitutionally. He can steal elections. He can compromise judicial systems. So if these systems are supposed to share powers with the president, yet all of them submit their powers to the president, how come then do you now say that you're practicing democracy, where you have members of National Assembly that has not from 1960 to date significantly altered the Constitution of the Federal Republic? Here they do constitutional amendment, they patch it up at the seams. But again, I remind you, no civilian administration has done any major structural change in Nigeria. Why then do we keep this democracy? What is the utility of Nigeria's poor attempts at democracy? We look around and see what our neighbors are doing. You see, for example, what is happening in Burkina Faso. They are able to make the progresses they are making in such a short time because the laws are concentrated, the powers are concentrated. So yes, I know when people talk about dictatorship, they say, what if? Yes, every dictatorship wears the character of the dictator. Every monarchy wears the character of the monarch. Every governance structure wears the character of the arrowhead. But then you see that helps to aggregate and make for quick decision making. So if the person wants to be good, he becomes really good in such a short time and then can produce results. If the person is also bad, you will feel it. But then in our own experiment, we have a dictatorship in disguise. It grants them autonomy to spend their money the way they want. But then on important national issues, it limits them. And that's why we have debated restructuring for ages. It's not happening. Not one civilian president has created even one local government. And the major issues we have agreed in Nigeria are those structural issues. And our pretense at democracy, if we run it again for another 100 years, will not allow us to really solve those structural issues. Yes, you might build one bridge here, you might do constitutional amendments here, but you can't really affect the nation in a fundamental way. The point is to remind us, to ask us, why are we paying so heavily to have a National Assembly that is not working? Why are we spending so heavily to conduct periodic elections where we are told we are supposed to choose, yet we are not making any choice? Have we not seen the progress of Saudi Arabia, the progress of the Middle East in the past 50 years? Have we not also seen the progress of Asia in the past 50 years? Name one country that achieved the kind of progress we want to achieve using the kind of systems we have imposed on ourselves. And we have unquestioned that system for years. That system is not producing results. Dear brothers and sisters, it's time to rethink democracy in Africa. It's time to redesign and own our own unique governance structures. And when we run our governance, it's a pretense to assume that Africa's history started from 1900. No, we had unique governance systems before the invasion of the West, and it was working. Yeah, we may have to tinker a little bit, panel beat a little bit here and there, but we have to own our unique systems that understand the language, the culture. Because democracy imposes on you some form of responsibilities, but our citizens are unable to live up to those responsibilities. Democracy assumes that when you distribute powers within different power nodes, that those people who have distributed powers will use it. In our own case, we have seen that the lawmakers agree and willingly give the president their powers, and yet they receive payments from us. Our judges, Supreme Court judges, willingly give their powers to politicians, and we still retain them. So why do we keep producing this system that is expensive, that we can't form consensus, yet it has not delivered on any of the promises of democracy? Africa's morning is at hand, but it will start by us redesigning our own systems, including our own governance systems. And I know this video might rattle people a little bit because this is the first time they're hearing it. Because from primary school, they've been drumming it into your ear, democracy is the best form of government. I've now provided you materials that will help you to come out of that cocoon. Think, which nation do you know that did not achieve a stable economy before transitioning into democracy that has worked? Now you say America. America is a unique exception. And from the recent files, you see how America has been using their so-called democracy, CIA and USAID, to impose their will on nation states. All of those states, how many of them has really achieved the developmental goals of their people? We have to design our governance structures, and we have to run what is unique to us and what will help us grow. Now, when we use systems that can help us grow, when we have gotten to that level, for instance, the monarchical system in the Middle East is unsustainable. But at least it's delivering results. In the next 50 years, the people will challenge those results, topple those systems and plan democracy. And it will work because they now have baseline education and they now have the baseline finances. Today, we don't have baseline education, we don't have baseline finances. And you're telling me that you have given me the power to choose. That choice, according to Paul Collier, will never work even if you try it for another 200 years. Thank you so very much. My name is Chima Christian. Africa's morning is at hand.